Hey everyone, Megan from The Wandering Goose, and I am going to be doing a tutorial for another one of our basket inserts. This one is going to be for Easter. A couple things you're going to need is I like to use some painter's tape, and I'm going to peel off a section, and I'm going to roll the ends so that it's sticky side up on my table, and that's what I'm going to stick all of my small pieces to. You're going to need the paints that came with your kit, a pair of scissors and some sponges, paintbrushes, glue, the string that came with your kit, and then a white paint marker. After you open up your kit, you're going to want to go ahead and separate all of your pieces by color. So here I'm going to put all of my carrots together. I'm going to put some of my bunny pieces together. Just that when you're painting with your different colors, it's easier because you have everything sorted. Once everything's sorted, you're going to go ahead and grab one of your sponges if you have one. If not, paintbrushes are fine as well. I just find sponges are easier to use. And I'm cutting off the ends of my sponges so I have new ones. These are left over from another project. So I'm just getting a nice blank edge, and I'm going to start with our first color. It's entirely up to you if you want to do a gray bunny or a white bunny. For this particular project, I decided to do a white bunny, but in other projects I've also done gray bunnies, and they turn out super cute too. Once I have some of my white paint in this project, I am going to dab it onto the big end of your sponge, and you're going to do a up and down motion with your sponge so you have a nice even coverage. You want to make sure you dab off any of the excess paint because you don't want it to go inside of the engraved parts for the eyes. If you have too much paint on your sponge, it'll fill in those engraved parts and it'll make it difficult to see where the eyes are. With the white, when you're done, if you feel the need to put on a second coat, this paint dries fairly quickly, so as long as it's dry, you can go ahead and put on a second coat as well. When you're done with the bunny's head, you're going to want to go ahead and do the little two pieces that look kind of like jelly beans. Those are going to be his little front paws. So you're going to probably want those to be the same color as your bunny, whether you used white or gray. Once you're finished with your bunny, whether you did white or gray, we're going to go ahead and move on to the soft pink. Soft pink is going to be used for the insides of his ear pieces and then the little tiny heart that is his nose. I also decided to use the soft pink. I'm going to use it for the little tag as well. This is going to be another one of those instances where you want a minimal amount of paint on your sponge. You don't want to accidentally fill in any of your lettering. So just using a tiny bit of paint, going straight up and down so you avoid filling in that lettering. Once you're finished with your tag, I'm going to use a little bit of the lavender color. And I'm going to use it with my soft pink. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dip one edge of my sponge in the soft pink and then the opposite edge into the lavender. And I'm going to use an empty space to kind of blend the two colors together. And I'm just going to add some color to my eggs. The eggs can be as elaborate or as simple as you want them to be. You can do them as a solid color, just one color, or you can go ahead and paint each of the individual little sections of it with a different color. Here I'm just going to play around with some coloring and see what I like. So with my sponge, I just went ahead and I dipped it into the purple so that the entire sponge is now purple. And I'm adding the purple up to the top there, leaving my purple and pink blend in that center section. And I have purple up on top. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in another color. Before I add in the other color, I decided since I still had purple on my sponge, I'm going to add purple to my second egg. Just adding a little bit of purple to the edge there, Again, this is completely up to you how you want to do your eggs. You can do half colors going sideways, like the egg on the left-hand side, or you can do colors going down the egg, or you can paint each individual piece with different colors. So I have lavender on one half of my sponge, and then I have the Dixie Belle blue on the other half. And with this, I'm going to go ahead and make sure my purple lines up with the existing purple on this egg. And just add a little bit of blue to the edge. Just kind of blending it. And adding a little bit of color to it. Then while I have the same colors on my sponge, I'm just going to add some color to the bottom half of this other egg. Just dabbing up and down. You don't want to fill in those decorative lines. And I want to make it so that the pink line isn't quite so harsh. So I added a little bit more pink to my sponge. I'm taking it down a little bit further down. And then just blending in the colors together. Here I'm going to add just a little bit of white to my sponge. And I'm going to put just a little bit of white along the bottom edge, just to give it another color on there. You can use as many or as few colors on your eggs as you want. And as I always say, this is just paint. So as I'm going along, I'm realizing I'm not loving the way that these colors are coming out. So I added a little bit more of the soft pink to the one half of my sponge and the Dixie Belle to the other half. And this paint dries so quickly, I'm going to go just right over top of what I've done. I'm going to blend those colors together a little bit more. And already looks very different than it did before. Going back to get a little bit more of the light pink and purple on my sponge. I'm going to use that to blend that harsh line I have. Once I've finished playing around with this particular egg, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut my sponge and get a new clean edge on it. Making sure to get any of the wet paint off of my sponge. Then I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next part of my project. For this part, because the carrots are on the background as well, and I need to be a little bit more precise with my painting so I don't get the orange into the green leafy part on the top, I'm going to just use a paintbrush with a very minimal amount of orange paint, doing a very, very light-handed stroke so I don't get any paint filling in those little curly Q lines that are on our carrots to give them some character. Just a very light hand, minimal amount of paint. I'd rather see you do multiple coats to get the color orange you want than to accidentally fill those in. Once you've finished your two little extra carrots, we're going to go ahead and paint the carrots that are right directly on the background, being very careful to not go into the green leafy parts. You can go into the section of it that is going to be covered by the egg though, just to make sure that there's no naked wood showing when you start assembling all of your pieces. When you get to the carrots that are next to that decorative egg, you're going to want to just be very, very careful that you're not painting into where that decorative egg is going to be. So kind of get an idea of where the carrot ends and where the egg begins. Just kind of, keeping it a general round egg shape. If you need some help figuring out where the carrots kind of end, you can put your bunny over top, see where his hands are, And just make sure that you don't have any naked wood showing that the hands won't cover. As you're going along, it's a smart idea to kind of place your pieces just to make sure that everything's getting covered the way it's supposed to. So that blank egg piece is going to be a spacer that's going to go underneath that. My particular egg is the purple, pink, and blue one. So I'm just placing my pieces on there to make sure I have all of my carrot sections covered. Next, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the green. The green is going to be the top sections of your carrots. So again, I'm going to use a paintbrush with another, just a very, very light hand. You don't want to accidentally fill in any of those engraved marks that give the tops a little bit of character. Being very careful to not go into the orange, just having a nice steady hand with the minimal amount of paint. Once I've finished with all of my green tops, I'm going to grab one of my sponges that has a clean edge. I'm getting a partial amount of green on one side and white on the other side. And I'm going to blend the two colors together, and I'm just going to add a little bit of highlighting to the tops of my carrots. So just leaving the white edge to the outside, and I'm just going to add a little bit of highlighting to the edges. Then here I decided to use a little bit of the white that was on my sponge and give a little bit of highlighting to the edge of my carrot. It's a little bit more white than what I had hoped to have. So I am going to use a paintbrush that is slightly damp, a little bit of water on it. And I'm going to kind of soften that white paint. I'm going to take my sponge, and I'm going to add a little bit of green and a little bit of white together, and I'm going to create a lighter shade of the green. I'm going to use this for my egg. I didn't want such a bright, I guess a dark green. I'm looking for a brighter green. So I have a lighter green there that I just made, and I'm going to use a little bit of the yellow. Again, these eggs can be whatever colors you want them to be. So I have the lighter green on one side, and I'm going to have yellow on another side. And you can see I'm struggling to find a spot on my paint palette. And I'm just going to make this egg a little bit of green and a little bit of yellow. And while I have the yellow on my sponge, I'm actually going to use the yellow to accent my carrots instead of white. You could always use a little bit of white, or you can even use a little bit of white mixed in with the orange just to kind of get a brighter orange. For this particular project, I decided to use yellow as the highlighting. You can highlight on either side of your carrots, whichever side you want it to be on. That's entirely up to you. Once you're done with those colors, I cut my sponge and I'm going to move on to the gray. The gray I am going to use on my bunny. I decided to do the white bunny, so I'm going to do a little bit of shadowing along the edges of my bunny with the gray. The gray can be very harsh on the white, so you want to make sure that you have very, very minimal amount of paint on your sponge, and you're just going to very lightly dab a little bit of the gray around the outside edge. This takes a little bit of practice, So if it doesn't come out right the first time, you can either use a damp paintbrush and kind of essentially erase the paint, the gray paint, or you can wait for it to dry. You can paint white over top of it and try again. Just takes a little bit of practice with doing this. If you have decided to do the gray bunny instead of the white bunny, you could always use white to do the outside edges. This part is entirely optional. So here I am going through with a little bit of damp paintbrush, just softening those edges because I had put a little bit too much of the gray on it. So I'm just going to keep playing around with my edges until I get them to look the way I want them to. So after a lot of finagling with the sponge and then a damp brush, I finally have a little bit of just a gray edge around the outside edge of my bunny, just giving him a little bit of shadowing so he's not quite so two-dimensional. I'm going to do the same thing with his little jelly bean feet, just adding a tiny bit of gray to the outside edges. Once you have your pieces painted, I highly recommend kind of assembling it to see how it looks. Make sure everything looks the way you want it to. Stacking the pieces on top of each other without any glue just yet, just to get a kind of an idea of what it looks like. The 2 extra carrots can kind of go wherever you want them to go. I decided to add them on the left-hand side behind that egg, just to create a little pile of carrots behind the eggs. Once you have an idea of where you want all of your pieces to go, I went ahead and I used a fine Posca white paint marker. And I'm just going to add some accent lines to all of my pieces. All of these accent lines are merely guidelines. You don't have to put them where I put them. You can go with whatever looks good to you. If you do your accent lines and you don't like it, unfortunately you're going to have to paint over top of it in order to get them off. Most of the time that's not a huge issue when you have just a solid color, but with these ombre pieces, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to go ahead and erase those, so just make sure you have a general idea of where you want those lines to be before you make them. And then as you're finishing up with the lines, you can kind of get an idea where everything goes. And remember where it was all before you started separating out your pieces, because now we're going to go ahead and glue. I prefer to use the Gorilla Super Glue. It sets very quickly and it's very easy to work with. You're just going to add a dot here and there. A little bit goes a long way. If you have wood glue, that's perfectly fine as well. Just know that wood glue is going to take a little bit longer for it to set, so some pieces may move while it's curing. Here is when you're going to add in that little half egg piece that was not painted. All that is a spacer so that your big egg piece can slide over top of the edge of your basket. So the eggs are kind of spilling out of your basket. So make sure you put that spacer piece in between the backer and this egg piece before you finish assembling. Then you can go ahead and glue on your other egg piece. And then once all of your pieces are kind of set, you're going to add glue to the front side of your little extra carrot pieces. Keep in mind where they're going to be attached so you don't have too much glue. You don't want glue hanging out where it's not supposed to be. So you're just going to add glue to the front side of these carrots. And you're going to hold them in place for a couple seconds if you have the super glue. And then move on to the next carrot. And I almost put the glue on the back side, but you're going to want to make sure you add the glue to the front side of where it's going to connect with your other pieces. While your pieces are setting, you're going to go ahead and grab the string piece that is included in your kit. And then you're going to use it for your tag. You're going to fold the string in half, and you're going to take the folded half and thread it through the hole of your tag, and then take the tails and pull it through that loop. Then that way you have a secure tag. Then you're going to go ahead and add on some accent lines if you haven't already. I had forgotten to do that. But then once you're done with your accent lines, if you haven't already done them, you're going to take your string and you're going to put a knot in the end of it, and the knot is going to be what holds it from pulling through. The knot's going to be on the back side, so it's going to hold the string from pulling through, and that way it'll sit dangling from your basket. And then once you're ready to assemble, you're going to just put that string kind of in a little notch there. Add your tab into your basket, and there you go. You have this month's insert all ready to be displayed. Thanks so much for joining me for another video, and I can't wait to show you what next month's project is. You can buy your kits on thewanderinggooseofholland.com, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more tutorials.